Hello, I'm Dr. Leigh Ettinger. Thank you to VeganLinked for inviting me to share my story here. In the tradition of doctors from ages past, I performed an experiment on myself. Now I'm going to share the results with you. First, a medical disclaimer. This presentation is for informational purposes only. If you have been vegan for more than, say, 5 minutes, then I'm sure that you have been asked this question. Where do you get your protein? And I'm certain that you have a standard answer that can either start or maybe finish a conversation on the topic. If you dare, turn the question around to the curious omnivore and ask them, where does their protein go? My little experiment investigated this question. A little bit about me. I graduated medical school in 1998 and then did 3 years of general pediatric training and then 3 years of pediatric nephrology training, learning how to take care of kids with kidney disease. I graduated that program in 2004 and joined a major medical center to work as an attending physician. I first learned about the plant-based diet in 2014. I left that hospital 17 years later in 2021 to found the Dr. Herbivore telehealth practice. So, 17 years of being an attending physician and the 3 years of fellowship training was 20 years of analyzing urine samples. So I bring that background to this experiment that I did on myself, changing my protein intake and analyzing my own urine samples. I did a 2-day experiment where I varied my protein intake but tried to keep everything else pretty much the same. On day 1, I took in 2,618 calories. On day 2, I ate just 2 calories more. I carefully measured my intake with Chronometer. It's a free program that tracks calories and nutrients. Actually, these 2 days were about 2 weeks apart just because of logistics. Of course, I ate 100% plant-based on both days. That's the way I roll. On the first day, 10% of my calories were from protein. On the second day, I doubled it. I had 20% of my calories as protein. Now, I could have gone and just drank maple syrup all day on my low protein day, but I really wanted to eat typical foods. I ate predominantly whole plants and then some processed plants. I tried to keep it about the same each day, but with all the other variables, I ended up eating 70% whole foods and 30% processed foods on the first day. On the second day, I ate a 60-40 ratio. On the second day of high protein, I could have just drank protein shakes all day, but again, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this experiment with the kind of food that I usually ate, and mostly whole foods. Another important factor was that I really went through in detail and made sure that I got 100% of my recommended daily allowance of calcium and zinc and copper, of everything else. It was really a good, nutritious day. I wasn't in any kind of nutritional stress. I was getting all the vitamins and minerals and all the essential amino acids. It was a very complete day, except for vitamin D, which we can get from the sun or from a supplement. I also had no caffeine, no alcohol, and no vitamins on these days. Now for my out. I actually had a restful day on both days. I just took about 6,000 steps. I didn't work out. I didn't go to the gym. It was just a day of puttering around each day. I used my powers as a nephrologist to send off a 24-hour urine test on myself on both days. The urine report tells how much nitrogen has been collected. Nitrogen is an element in protein. The only way it enters the body is as protein, and the only way nitrogen enters the urine is from broken down protein. Healthy kidneys do not urinate out protein, but we can back calculate from the grams of nitrogen in the urine how many grams of protein were broken down by the body. So the experiment was to double my protein intake and see what happened to my urinary nitrogen output. This is a scale of daily protein intake. The minimum that's recommended is 0.3 grams per kilogram per day. That's 21 grams. For a guy my size, it's not a lot. The recommended daily allowance for someone my size is 56 grams. So I definitely wanted to meet my recommended daily allowance. Athletes are recommended to take in 1.2 grams per kilo per day. For me, that would be around 84 grams. In this country, the typical adult male who is sedentary is taking in 101 grams. So like twice the recommended daily allowance and maybe 5 times the minimum that's recommended. So now I'm going to break down these categories and show where the protein goes. Let's first talk about the minimum and the recommended daily allowance. That protein intake replaces the normal protein turnover that's happening in our body every day, no matter what we're doing. We use protein in our diet, in our body, in spots to repair and replace the turnover of scaffolding in our tissues and organs. Protein is an important part of our immune system. Our white blood cells are traveling around in our body fighting infection, and the bullets that they use to kill bacteria and invaders are made out of proteins from our diet. Proteins are hormones. Hormones are chemical signals that travel around our body, making people men and women and dealing with stress. Proteins are also transporters, carrying elements and other compounds around the body. For example, hemoglobin is a protein that carries oxygen from our lungs to our muscles. Proteins are enzymes that facilitate chemical reactions. For example, our digestion uses proteins to break down carbohydrates and fats. And then protein acts as buffers to maintain our body pH, making sure we're not too acidotic or alkalotic. Protein helps us maintain fluid balance. Proteins in our bloodstream actually hold water in our bloodstream. If the protein is too low in a person's bloodstream, edema can develop as water seeps out of the bloodstream. And then in desperate situations, when a person is not getting enough calories from fat and carbohydrates, the body will use any protein in the diet for energy. Me, during a sedentary day eating 2,600 calories, should not have needed to use any protein for energy. These are all the important roles of protein that need to be met every day to sustain life. Once all of those protein needs are met, extra protein can be used for growth. So a growing child needs adequate protein. If they are not meeting at least the RDA, then growth may suffer. This is what everyone wants, muscle growth. However, we don't want tumor growth. A woman growing a baby needs protein to make that baby grow, and then also for making milk. If someone has a wound that needs to be repaired or a surgical incision that needs to be healed, protein will go there. Same with a burn. Note that the body can take some dietary protein for these purposes and sacrifice other purposes from the previous slide, and vice versa. For example, a tumor may take proteins to metastasize that were destined to be part of the immune system. Some of our dietary protein ends up as waste. We really have no ability to store protein to be used in the future. If extra sugar is eaten, it is stored as glycogen or fat. If extra fat is eaten, it is stored as fat. But if you eat extra protein, there really is no place for it to go to be saved for another day. Extra protein is broken down, and the nitrogen appears in our urine. Every 6.25 grams of protein turns into 1 gram of nitrogen. That will go out in the urine and can be measured on the 24-hour urine test. And then we can back calculate to how much protein was broken down that day. We actually lose a little bit of nitrogen in our sweat every day. Some cells which contain protein and nitrogen are sloughed off every day. We lose some skin cells and maybe some hair and nails, and then some cells that line our gastrointestinal tract every day. Women lose their uterine lining during their monthly cycle. And then some of our dietary protein is not absorbed at all and goes out in our stool. Back to the experiment. My low protein intake day was just 67 grams of protein. I was aiming for my RDA of 56 grams of protein. It was actually pretty difficult to get it that low while still meeting the recommended daily allowance of all the other vitamins and minerals. It was a very hard challenge to get that number down, that low even while just eating plants. Now the amount of nitrogen in my urine multiplied by 6.25 shows that on this day my body broke down 51 grams of protein, leaving 16 mystery grams of protein. On my high protein day, I really overdid it, and I took in 137 grams of protein, more than doubled my intake. And on the other extreme, this was pretty difficult to do, especially since I was trying to keep the calorie intake the same. How much urine nitrogen came out and then calculating how much protein came out? That was 84 grams, this time leaving 53 grams unaccounted for. Let's try to figure out where this missing protein went. Was it used in replacing my usual protein functions? Was it used for growth? Was it wasted? Let's cross off things it obviously was not being used for. I'm not a growing child. I'm not pregnant and not lactating. I didn't have any wounds or surgeries or burns. I would hope that I had enough calories, carbohydrates, and fats that I didn't need to use any for energy. And then this 16 grams and 53 grams did not come out in my urine. I measured what came out in my urine. And then I'll shade out everything else here that would be constant from day 1 of the experiment to day 2. These days were just a few weeks apart. There's no reason to think that all of a sudden I would be making more hemoglobin on one day, or all of a sudden I would need to adjust my body pH on another day. I wasn't sick. Why would my immune system need more protein? These were very sedentary days. I doubt I would be growing more muscle. I hope that I don't have a tumor, but if I did, I doubt between a few weeks that there would be much change in a tumor's protein demand. My skin surface area did not change, so my nitrogen losses would be stable there. And I would expect that I would have sloughed off the same amount of hair and skin cells and gastrointestinal cells. So where did the protein go? That extra 16 grams and extra 53 grams, I can only conclude that I pooped it out. All that extra dietary protein just became more waste. Looking back here at the scale, on day 1 I ate 67 grams but metabolized only 51 grams, which is less than my RDA of 56 grams. Now, there's a 95% chance that my protein needs are somewhere in this yellow bar range at the bottom of the slide. If I did not absorb that 16 grams of protein, would I become protein deficient over time if I really needed that 56 grams and I only got 51 grams? Perhaps. Again, I had really hard time. I really had to go out of my way to actively avoid protein on this day, and I still only got my intake down to 67 grams with 51 grams absorbed. Is this an argument to say that we should eat animal protein because animal protein is more easily absorbed? It more easily goes from my gastrointestinal tract into my bloodstream. I don't think so. First, you can look and see that on day 2 that all I had to do was eat some more whole plants, and I could easily absorb way beyond my 56 gram needs. Why would I need to go and eat meat when I can just get more proteins from plants? That's like saying, oh, I want to get more oxygen, so I'm going to start smoking, because when I take a deep breath through a cigarette, I get more oxygen. Yes, but so many more toxins and unwanted materials get into my lungs. That's the same way I think about animal protein. Yes, I can absorb more protein that is eaten, but animal protein comes with cholesterol, saturated fat, trans fat, compounds that may cause cancer, etc., etc. So why would I do that? I can definitely get enough protein to meet my needs with plants. Now look at this 53 grams of unabsorbed protein. That might actually be helpful for weight loss. Protein has 4 calories per gram, so that's 200 calories that I enjoyed eating, but were pooped out. That's 200 calories that passed right through me. It's funny that sugar is called empty calories. If you eat some extra sugar, it gets stored as glycogen or as fat to be used at another time. These calories from protein, though, may really be empty calories that are just flushed down the toilet. The original question was, what would happen to my urinary nitrogen output when I doubled my protein intake? It did not double, perhaps as was expected, because I ended up pooping out a larger proportion of protein, probably because the day's overall protein absorbability went down based on the plant foods I selected. Or some say that there is a maximum amount of protein that can be absorbed per meal, and I hit that limit. Now, I'm going to make an assumption here. On either day, if I had eaten meat or had a protein shake, either a whey protein powder or a plant protein powder, all that would have happened is that the gray bars would have gotten bigger. On these sedentary days, my body would have absorbed that protein better from the meat or from the protein shake than from the whole plants, but I would have just urinated out more nitrogen waste rather than pooped out the unabsorbed protein. So in sum, this is not a true study of any academic value. N equals 1. Maybe my body hates protein. Please don't make any conclusions from this experiment. We do know that our body does not and cannot store proteins. Actually, I still don't know exactly what my daily protein needs are. On day 1, my body metabolized 51 grams, but that may have been, say, 30 grams of replacing worn-out proteins and then 21 grams of unused eaten protein that just turned into nitrogen waste. What if I worked out? What if I took 7,000 steps or 10,000 steps or ran a marathon? Or what if I hit the gym and made some plates of metal move up and down? What would have happened to the protein I ate? Or what if I were sick or had caffeine or had a stressful day or underwent surgery? Even if I could figure out exactly what my protein needs are for a day, that number would be obsolete the next day because of all those variables about health and activity, which may be why people just believe they need more and more protein just to be certain that they are not getting too little. I hope that I showed that plants can meet a person's protein needs and then some. And if there's concern, just eat more plants. But really, extra dietary protein likely just means more waste. Thanks again to VeganLinked for inviting me onto this channel. If you learned something from this video, please like and subscribe, and then share it with the next person who asks you, where do you get your protein?